Hey, what's up? I'm Nathan. This is the Media Hole. This is my first video for the channel, so I really want to get your feedback. Let me know what I did and what I could improve on, alright? Alright, let's get on with it. In 2017, we had a ton of great films, both big and small. But in the YouTube space, we tend to only hear about the blockbusters, the big movies, and we tend not to have a lot of talk about Academy Award nominated stuff. Now, if I'm being honest, I don't really care about the Oscars, but this year I managed to see almost every single movie that was nominated for Best Picture, with some exceptions. But the one movie that appears on that Best Picture list that does not belong is Christopher Nolan's Dunkirk. Dunkirk is a $100 million big budget studio blockbuster, and it appears on a list with movies that cost less than $5 million to make. And on top of that, it's the second worst movie on that list. And the worst part about it is it's the one that the most people have seen. So today, I'm gonna tell you why Dunkirk does not deserve Best Picture. So before I get into my full-on analysis and review, going deep into the movie, we're gonna start with a summary. Dunkirk is about the retreat from Dunkirk during World War II, where nearly 300,000 soldiers were evacuated across the English Channel. 3 stories are being told. The longest story, The Mole, is about the soldiers on the beach trying to evacuate. The second story, By Sea, is about a civilian boat, activated to assist in the evacuation, coming across a shell-shocked Cillian Murphy. And finally, the third and shortest part, By Air, is about the British Air Force led by Tom Hardy defending the ships from the skies. So here I am. I've seen Dunkirk 2 times. And I'm gonna tell you what makes it bad, what good there is left, and how with some creativity, could have been a great film. Be warned though, from here on out we've got all unmarked spoilers. So if you want to see Dunkirk, watch it now, and then come right back to me.
Switch, trip, switch. What we do when the power's up.
The bad.
What do we do when the lights go down? What we do when the power's up. What do we do when the lights go down?
So let's start with the big stuff and work our way down to the small. The biggest problem in Dunkirk is the entirety of The Mole. The main characters, who are never named, barely speak, barely act, and barely emote. A scene where the one with the weird chin watches a man commit suicide plays like this. And here he is when he's on a boat struck by a torpedo. There's no emotion at all. This makes these characters into nothing more than cardboard cutouts. They're unthinking, they're unfeeling. And the problem with that is that when this happens, it makes the viewer not able to care. They're not invested in the story or the characters. And that's bad storytelling. Another problem with Dunkirk is the major lack of dialogue. Now, Nolan clearly made this choice as sort of an apology for The Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar, and Inception, where people called it too much dialogue. But the problem with those movies weren't that there was too much talking. It was that it was too much exposition. It felt like there was no time between explanations, and it was all like, we need to be instructed about something. But the problem with cutting down the dialogue in this film, Dunkirk, is that it leaves only exposition left. So there's no room for dialogue that tells you something about character, or is funny, or interesting. It's just all explanation, exposition, right? All that stuff. And this feeling is pushed to its max in the scenes with Jarvis from Agent Carter and Kenneth Branagh. And another problem within The Mole, especially, is that it's just a bunch of setups for bad set pieces. There's a great intro, which is ultimately undermined by text on the screen. And then there's a neat shootout. And a bit where Chin Boy gets saved by the French. We go straight into the bit from there when they get bombed. Then there's the bit with the stretcher, and no, that's so fucking stupid. It's nothing, it's no effort, it's bullshit. Yay! 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 We did it! We crossed the bullshit! But no, seriously, this is the most manufactured bullshit I've ever seen. Then we go to the boat and... oh no! The boat fell down! And then we're back to the beach, signifying that all of the previous scenes were filler and nothing important happened. We go to the beach boat with all these other dudes. It turns into a big pointless argument simulator. One guy dies, everyone gets saved by the by sea people, and we get the classic Nolan ending where someone speechifies over a montage of images.
We shall fight in France. We shall fight on the seas and oceans.
Credits. Other than The Mole as a whole, there are three other major problems with Dunkirk. Now the first one I'm only going to touch on for a little bit as it's pretty subjective, but it feels like Dunkirk doesn't have any meaning, it doesn't have a message. I don't really like war movies, I haven't seen a ton of them, but I have seen Full Metal Jacket, and that's a movie with a message. That's a movie with meaning. It has something to say about war and soldiers and people in general. And The problem is, Dunkirk doesn't have anything to say, not about war and not about people. It just Michael Bays its way from set piece to set piece, and that's fine. That's fine for a blockbuster movie. I don't have a problem with big, dumb fun. I like the Marvel movies. But the problem is when big, dumb fun is being marketed as an award-winning drama, and it's up against movies that deserve it way more. The next problem is the way that these stories are edited. Now, on a first watch, you tend to think that scenes that are being cut between each other are meant to be taking place simultaneously, if that makes sense. You think that it cuts from this to this because they're happening at the same time, or they're happening one after another. That's the way that film language works in terms of editing. But the problem is that they're not. Now, of course, that's okay. That's not a huge problem with the movie. It just makes it a bit of a confusing watch the first time. The big problem is how that affects the pacing. These edits tend to make certain scenes feel like they're going on forever, with the biggest one being the beached boat scene in The Mole. Now, that scene is being cut to from two way more interesting scenes in both visual and dramatic terms, and so it makes that boat bit feel like it's going on for an entire hour of the runtime, when the movie's only an hour 45. Another problem with Dunkirk is it doesn't feel like it has any teeth. Dunkirk is rated PG-13, and, it means that nothing too horrific can actually happen in the film. Only 2 named characters die, and only one of them actually matters to the audience, and that's my boy, George. So what this means is that while all these great moments, this spectacle, these effects are happening, I can't help but notice how clean and sterile it is. If this guy is really getting hit by a bomb, where's the blood? Where's the body parts? I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to be too gruesome or a gorehound or edgy or whatever, but, it just feels like violence, and this kind of violence, doesn't have a consequence. And that's weird. It feels almost offensive to make war PG. Because war's not PG. It's fucked up. And it's wrong to market it as this big, huge spectacle when it's nothing of the sort. One thing I just wanted to add here is in 2017 we got the movie Wonder Woman, which is a way better war movie than Dunkirk. It absolutely has a message, and that's that, maybe mankind is inherently evil, and that's why these things happen, war and bad things and all that shit. And it also has some scenes that manage to show the horror of war. There's that one with the guy, he's carried away and he has no legs. And there's the scene where that village is bombed or destroyed or whatever. So real quick, here's where I'm going to talk about my nitpicks. I know this part can be kind of boring to a lot of viewers, so I'm just going to throw up a time code here with the actual time to skip to and maybe a link saying, hey, because the next part after this is going to be where I compliment the film. So here's your last warning. You're going to hear some bullshit after this. So nitpick number 1 is the aspect ratio. Now, like I said, this is mostly just stuff that didn't bother me. A lot of people might not notice it, but the aspect ratio changes all the time. Sometimes even in a simple sequence, like shot, reverse shot, the aspect ratio switches. There's a 60-second sequence with over 10 aspect ratio changes.
Spitfires! God, he got him! Yeah. The Heiko's moving on!
back in 2016, when Transformers, whichever fucking new one was coming out, I don't care. People were getting pissed off at Michael Bay when there was 8 aspect ratio changes in a 2-minute sequence. Now, when Michael Bay does it, people give him shit. But Nolan does it worse, and he gets away with it. And again, these aspect ratio changes aren't necessarily going to be a bad thing. In a movie that I like, The Grand Budapest Hotel, there's aspect ratio changes. But they're done there to denote meaning. They tell you that there's a flashback happening without having to tell you. And also, they're not switching constantly between each other. They're like, here's a section of the movie in this. Here's a section of the movie like that. So, another little nitpick is there's a couple of actors who don't do great here and there. With the one that I'm actually willing to talk about being the dad from By Sea, who has a couple of line reads that come off a little bit flat and don't really sell the moment.
Yeah, bigger fish to fry.
You know, it's like somebody's right off screen holding a card with his lines on it, like, and he's like trying to like, this is the words right here. You know, I'm probably gonna cut that part out because that joke is not funny, or I will keep it in because this joke is. Another issue which doesn't really matter in the Blu-ray version, thankfully, but that I noticed when I saw it the first time in theaters. I was sitting kind of close to the screen, you know, in the shit seats, and, you know, it was really hard during the mole to tell the difference between the actors. They were all kind of the same sort of white boy with dark hair, looked the same, wet. Finally, and this is the last nitpick, I promise, is the horrible blue-green filter that's pasted over the entire movie. It ruins the otherwise gorgeous camera work and great visuals. Honestly, and when the visuals are the best thing about your movie, you shouldn't fuck them up with a filter. The good. Alright, so like the title card said, this section is going to be all good stuff. Now the reason why I just been shitting on this movie for however much time I was is honestly because I heard a lot about the good, and on YouTube and even in articles I couldn't find anything where people were really giving this movie the criticism it deserved for its bad parts. So that's why I opened with it. I know it was long, but here we are, here's the compliments. You're gonna hear Nathan talk about this movie in a positive manner. No more negative Nathan, only positive Playthin. As I already said in my nitpick section, in case you skipped it, the camera work and the visuals, even the direction of this movie are just phenomenal. These images are amazing. Nolan, or at least his cinematographer, knows exactly where to point and shoot the camera to make a scene look great. Just look at some of these images. There's so much to the visuals of this film. One sequence that works incredibly well are our final moments with Tom Hardy's pilot character. These little quiet moments we see him in are so meaningful. Like, it's good. It's just good. I don't know what to say about it. It's good. It's a good visuals. It's a good camera. It's good movement. Along with the angles, the effects are great too, with almost all of them being practical effects, and that means that they were actually done there, on set, or on location. This moment, where the bombs drop, the boat falling over, every dollar of effects really shows itself here. They even used real World War II era planes and just fucking stuck cameras on them for these plane sequences, and all of it works. Speaking of plane sequences, By Air is almost flawless. It's fantastic. The dogfights are exciting, and with very little dialogue, we learn a lot about Tom Hardy's pilot character. The bit with the broken gauge manages to add this extra sense of danger to the story, despite only being a small detail. And one thing that I thought was lazy storytelling in my first viewing is the third plane just disappearing. But it actually, on my second viewing, made the sequence tenser and almost kind of creepy. And the stakes just progressively get higher and higher over this whole story. And lastly, as I was saying in my camera work section, the ending of By Air is really good. With Hardy being a hero and stranding himself on the beach to save everyone. Him burning the plane and getting captured really works with that speech over top. All in all, I can't find any faults with this part of the movie. I also really enjoyed By Sea. Cillian Murphy is great as his character, and the story told is highly original. His interactions with the father are really interesting, which stand in huge contrast to the manufactured argument at the back end of The Mole. By Sea does tend to drag when the second pilot from By Air joins the crew. But the best moment comes at near the end.
He's dead, mate.
So be bloody careful with him.
Ya Melvin?
Will you be okay? Boy.
Good.
But that moment's really good though. As much as I fucking goofed on it. Goofed on it hard.
Man made the web, you don't
If
need
I
a
wrote
name. Man made a thoughts, I ain't too ashamed. Every thought I had, put it in a box.
Now we're entering the final part of the video. And I know it's been a long time, and it's a long video. But before we get into If I Wrote It, I really want to state two things. Number one, I do not claim that how I feel about this film or anything that I do on the show is objective, or that you can't or you're wrong to feel a different way than me about it. Art is subjective, and it's the job of the reviewer, which in this case is me, to state the reason why they feel a certain way about it, which I've hoped to attempt. And I know I use the word bad and good when these things aren't necessarily that black and white. But ultimately, that's how YouTube has decided that discourse on things has been done, so I don't mean to shake it up like that. Secondly, and this is, again, I need feedback. I don't claim to be a fantastic or great or good writer even, but I like playing If I Wrote It about movies, especially ones that I didn't love but I had things I liked. Because it's like a fun game, and ultimately, I want to be a writer. That's my goal here. Like, I like film, I want to write films, I want to write stuff. I'm a storyteller. And so, If I Wrote It is a fun little game to play that sort of is practice for me. It's interesting. And it might be the gimmick that separates this channel from other channels, hopefully. Or whatever. I don't know. You tell me how you feel about it. My ideal Dunkirk would be two stories that are meant to contrast against each other. And those would be the stories of a shell-shocked soldier being picked up by a civilian boat that's heading to Dunkirk, and the story of a pilot there to assist the evacuation attempt. That's Tom Hardy and Cillian Murphy's characters, and their stories are going to be represented here. Again, I want to keep this as close to the original as possible while making changes that affect the movie well and make it better. We're going to show some flashbacks from the point of view of Cillian Murphy. I'm just going to say Cillian Murphy. Basically, we're going to show the intro to the movie with them running away from the bullets, and we're going to show the bombs and all that stuff, and we're going to show some stuff that we didn't see, which is his boat. And on his boat, he is the only survivor. That's going to be cut between By Air, which is going to go largely unchanged. By Air with Tom Hardy, it's pretty solid on its own. We might add some more stuff to it, and some jokes, some interactions with the other pilots, just to fill the runtime a bit more, so that it feels like they're equal length, instead of like one being way longer than the other. And so we're going to have, the soldier can't talk, and he learns that they're going to Dunkirk, not away. And so he gets in an altercation. He hits George, just like in the movie. And George goes down. And the big difference being, this makes the soldier, Cillian Murphy, scared of himself. Scared of his own violent tendencies. Scared of what he's become. And he kind of is a bit on edge, but the boat still continues to Dunkirk, or is still on its way. A little bit later in the movie, George is dead, and the son finds out. But there's no other soldiers yet. We haven't picked up anybody. It's still Cillian Murphy and the family. And once Cillian Murphy finds out, this is his last straw. And he kind of goes crazy. So he pulls a knife, an army knife, on the dad. And he takes over the ship. He says, "We are going back to fucking England." And so the dad's like, alright. And so Cillian Murphy takes over the boat. He's like, "We're going back." He steers it back to England. But as it continues on, again, we're cutting back and forth between this and by air. I just don't want to describe more of by air, because I didn't change it. We proceed a little bit further, and the father and the son are in the below deck area. The son's like, "This guy fucking killed my friend. We're gonna take our boat back. We're gonna retake it by force." And the father says to the son, "You can't. That's my job. It's my boat. It's my responsibility." So the father goes up there. "We're gonna take it back by force." But the father, of course, being an old man, and Cillian Murphy being a slightly deranged young soldier man, defeats him and wounds him, albeit not fatally. The father's not going to die. It's not more death, but this father is stabbed by the knife. So the boy's holding the father. The father's like, "I'm going to be okay. We're almost back in England." Right? Fuck, we suck. And then we get back to England. And as we're getting back to England, we're heading in close. We're going to cut back to by air, where we're having that big dog fight at the end, where he fights the other plane, saves everybody on the beach, runs out of gas, has to land on the beach, right? That great moment. That great moment stays in the movie, thank God, because that moment's really good. We got the soldier, he gets off of the boat, and he's holding the bloody knife in his hand. We get a nice little close-up of the knife. It's like, oh, look at the knife, it's spooky knife. We go to the hospital, and we got the kid and the dad, and the dad's in a hospital bed, and he starts speechifying, because we're keeping the speech in the montage because it worked in that movie, and as I already said, we want to keep it as close to the original as possible. His speech is going to be about war, and specifically how it changes somebody, and I know that's like that's been done before, I've seen that in a movie. The way he talks about it, though, is going to be how war separates you from the person that your situation that you were born into puts you as. War distills you into a single entity, and you find the truest version of yourself. And so we see Cillian Murphy and Tom Hardy before the war. Tom Hardy is working under a gangster. He's the muscle. And we see him beating up a shop owner for money. And between that, we cut to a flashback of Cillian Murphy. And Cillian Murphy is a good student. He's being respectful to his teachers. He's working, in town doing, he's a newsie or something. He's doing something that is, nice, right? Like, he's working in a shop, or he's doing something nice that everybody knows. And we cut to Tom Hardy is on the beach, and his plane's on fire, and he's getting carried away by those German soldiers. And Cillian Murphy is back home, and he's having that great sort of hero's welcome back home. And we cut with the final shot being, maybe the bloody knife. From, Cillian Murphy smiling, he's back home, he's got maybe, a cup in his hand, and we cut to the knife. The end. Dunkirk. Credits. So I don't know about you, and I'm not gonna claim I'm some great writer, but I think for me that story is far more effective than the one we got. It manages to have the moments that allow it to be big blockbuster, big budget, big fun, and also be about something, and have some sort of meaning. I'm not saying it's great, but I'm saying it's more effective. Okay, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, leave me a like, tell people you know about it, your friends, your family, or whatever. Especially if they did or didn't like Dunkirk, had some sort of opinion on it. I'd love to get some feedback. Leave me a comment if you have suggestions about, different episodes to do, or how you felt about this one. I really want to know. This is my first video after all, so, I need some feedback. I want to know how I did. And finally, if you want to see more stuff like this, we're going to be doing deep dives on things. Hit that subscribe button. I'd love to see you in some future videos. Let me know.